Right, a very warm welcome everybody to yet another webinar. This is actually a webinar we've run a few times before, and actually when I saw the date on it, this one we did almost exactly a year ago actually, and we've entitled it Zero to Hero: How to Build a Sustainable Practice to Be Proud of. And as you'll see, as we kind of get into it, it takes you through some of the kind of the important things for a practice to be thinking about, and we've updated this a bit since we first did it, so hopefully you guys will find it insightful. So without further ado, just a bit of admin. Do keep your mics on mute. Do feel free to ask questions at the end in the chat box. So you can obviously ask questions whenever you fancy, but we'll answer them at the very end. And we are recording this webinar, as always, to put on YouTube, but also put on the MESHWORK, just in case you've got to drop off or for whatever reason you can't see the full thing. You can watch again at your leisure. Just a very quick reminder, obviously you guys have come through the network for the benefit of other people that you might want to share this with. We've got loads of other stuff coming up, and you know, the platform, just a reminder, is all about collaboration, engagement and sustainability. Very rapidly growing. We gained over 100 people last month, and as we put more content on there, that will accelerate very quickly. And also, the next thing that I wanted to mention was we're still trying to get to 1,000 members. We're edging ever closer as the weeks go by. We're down to obviously our last month of 2020, but still eminently possible to get to 1,000 members. So do feel free to share the invite link with other potential people in your network. And then finally on this, just wanted to mention we have a competition going, and actually it ends today. So we're offering £100 John Lewis voucher, or alternatively 100 quid's worth of trees planted through Ecology, which we use as a business. And we're trying to get your feedback on MESHWORK and how to improve it, what's great, and how we how we do a better job going forward. So that ends today. So if you haven't done the survey and you're up for winning 100 quid of vouchers, or planting 100 quid's worth of trees, then do that just after this, and hopefully you'll be in with a chance of winning. We'll pick one winner out of everybody who's done the survey. And a really quick kind of 15-20 seconds on Mesh Energy. Mesh Energy are an independent provider of net zero carbon building performance and engineering services. We essentially run a mission to instill confidence and pride in low energy projects through intelligent design. Practically, that means working with a lot of architects and wider design team members to make sustainable projects more successful, helping through almost all REBA stages, everything from initial strategy all the way through to design and kind of support on site, helping you find contractors, and at the very end helping with post-occupancy evaluation as well. So we're trying to be a kind of a holistic, dare I say, one-stop shop for helping design teams out with sustainable buildings. So the areas that we're going to cover in the webinar today, we've got kind of 5 key things we're going to do here. We're going to talk about some of the transition benefits and challenges that are in front of practices that are looking to move themselves on. We've got what I believe are kind of 4 key steps to success to get there, and we'll also share some stories of where we've seen other practices be successful, and then some steps about how to kind of get started today. There's a lot to do, and every journey starts with a single step, and so we'll just share some of those tidbits with you, and then we'll wrap up at the very end, and then obviously do questions as well. So as far as kind of benefits and challenges are concerned, this is quite a useful analogy to kind of have in the back of your mind. Sustainable buildings are a lot like the iPhone, in my humble opinion. They're highly desirable, increasingly desirable, and for some people are very desirable. Places that are low impact, low carbon, just as warm and comfortable as any place you've ever been in to live in, but doing better things for the world in which we live and not harming it. The beauty in many sustainable buildings is actually in simplicity of its design. So getting the design to work for you and not relying on laborious and expensive HVAC services and all the bells and whistles that people throw at buildings, or attempted to throw at buildings. So the beauty is in the simplicity of the design. They just work, proper, sustainably designed modern buildings just work, regardless of what's happening outside. They keep all the occupants warm and productive and functional. And they're a delight to use and experience. But the key thing to remember is, whilst it's easy to be simple and elegant and delight to use something, there's a lot of consideration that needs to go into the upfront design, and kind of a well-planned strategy, design and execution are all critical to achieving an incredible sustainable building. And every project's totally unique, and every project has its challenges. But as you'll find out as we're advocating, thinking harder about the opportunities now for sustainable building design leads to a far better end product for everybody and more success. So the benefits for kind of sustainable buildings and particularly architects are kind of starting with hearts and minds, feeling really great about the work that you're doing. Something, feedback that we're getting from a lot of architects is it feels more kind of purposeful, doing something which is, far more wholesome and less impactful, rather than just building for building's sake. So feeling great and better about the work that you're doing professionally, designing healthier and more comfortable buildings. Who doesn't want to do that? Our health over the last 2 months has come into sharp focus, and comfort is always a priority in dwellings, whether that's a home, whether that's an office, whether that's a sports facility. These all need to be comfortable, kind of stable environments that are suitable for the way that they're being used. There's a huge opportunity for education and upskilling in designing and understanding what you need to design sustainable buildings. And that's a big opportunity as far as I can see for everybody, whether you're a one-man band or a great big practice. Is really over the next few years, there's a huge opportunity to move yourself on as much as you know, and enlighten yourself. It's all about enlightenment as well. Attracting better and more aspirational customers. Again, we've seen this is a huge benefit. So being far more in tune with customers and homeowners and whatever the client background is, clients are a lot more informed about sustainability, and it's a far easier conversation to have. And you find that sustainability, excuse me, gets people a lot more kind of fired up. And if they're coming to you having self-selected themselves and you're able to do some great sustainable design work, it's a far kind of healthier relationship going forward. Also attracting better staff, same thing with customers, same thing happens with staff. We've found more engaged staff as the business has a better purpose towards sustainability and diversity. You attract better staff. As you might imagine, doing sustainable design, there's some great marketing opportunities off the back of that to differentiate yourself from what others are doing and just show that you were doing meaningful kind of sustainable design in the real world, rather than just talk about it on your website in text. And it allows you, all these things allow you to retain a competitive advantage. And the long and the short of it is, if you have a better competitive advantage, you can often charge higher fees or be more profitable as a business by differentiating yourself and just doing a better job. But there are challenges. It's not all sunshine and light. A lot of practices are having to think hard about reassessing their core purpose, and that takes thought and engagement with the team, and that all takes time, and some of this deep thinking is difficult. Thinking is hard work, I think, as Henry Ford once said. That's why not a lot of people do it. So people reassessing their core purpose of what they're doing is important, but it is a challenge. It's different from what we normally do. Changing out of our kind of comfortable business as usual kind of design processes in the practice is difficult as well. Changing direction and changing what we do is not usual, but it's necessary. Spending more time interpreting kind of clients' briefs around sustainability, again, is not something that we usually do. And that's something that practices are having to get their head around in an area that they might not quite be as sure about as they are about some of the areas of other areas of architectural design. There's another interesting point here about team trust as well. I think teams are having to trust themselves more, and what I mean is both internal teams and external teams. You know, there are specialists which can contribute to sustainable building design, and when we talk about not working in silos so much and trusting a wider design team to deliver on sustainable projects, that's not what everybody's used to, and that can be a challenge to trust other professionals more to contribute to the bigger picture. More detailing and technical work. A lot of highly sustainable projects can be won or lost in the detailing of the projects and the execution. So again, that all takes time in the design process, be it 3 or indeed REBA stage 4, to get the design down before starting on site. More monitoring during construction, more thoughts going on about the QA process during construction. And at the end, and again, this is very, very new for a lot of practices and a challenge as a result, is getting feedback, asking how you did, either measuring it or asking for it or doing both. So a lot of new things to do and a lot of challenges. So as part of a kind of a 4-step process, this is where I think any kind of aspiring sustainable practice should start. And this is just starting with sustainability. It sounds really, really obvious. But what do we mean by this? So this is about, in the first conversation you have with the client, talk about sustainability, talk about goals, talk about desire. Don't just kind of go down the path of your normal kind of architectural briefing on size and, you know, the look of it and the feel of it. You're more than welcome to do those things. It's a critical part. But sustainability and goals and aspirations must be discussed in the first meeting. Because the sooner you understand that, the sooner you put the rest of the building in context and can make sure that you're not going to have a difficult conversation further on down the line, or you're not going to design a building which is going away from those fundamental goals. So talk about these things early, be brave. It's not going to be that difficult a conversation. It's just a few more questions. And you know, just bear in mind that you're going to need some kind of basic knowledge if you're asking questions and then you get questions asked back of you. You're going to need to know at least something. You're not expecting all the answers. But you're going to need to know enough to be confident in kind of answering basic questions. And as you know, your kind of ongoing learning shouldn't make that too tricky. But this is where you should start in the first meeting, asking about sustainability. Thinking about it kind of more generally as well, and we've mentioned this kind of golden circle before also, is thinking about what is actually going to make this project a success. So you've talked to the client about goals and aspirations, but this slide covers off really digging deeply into why the client is doing what they're doing. Because if you understand the why of what the client is doing, you can define success. And then you know at the end, against that definition, whether the project has indeed been successful or not. If you don't, and in most cases, people don't ask this why, increasingly they are, but if they don't, by definition, the project is a failure for those reasons that I've discussed. And the reason for that is, if you don't understand or define what success looks like, then you can never achieve it. And if you can't achieve success, then it's going to be a failure. It's a fairly binary thing. And so this is why this is so important. We all want projects to be successful, and they should be successful for everybody, but at the very least, they should be successful for the client who is paying the bills. And that's why understanding what their definition of success is, which may be very, very different from your definition of success, or it may be the same thing, but if you don't ask, you'll never know. And this was something actually I pulled out of the book that I wrote a couple of years ago. And this is a kind of a pyramid which starts at the top here, this kind of really emotional understanding, the big why, and then works down to kind of measurable things the design team can get their head around. Because what you tend to find is that at the very kind of primal level, people will speak very, very emotionally about why doing something. And that's anything. It might be building a house, it might be buying a car, it might be, I don't know, taking their kids to school, or, you know, whatever it is. Everything that we do, particularly the bigger things, you know, are emotional. But emotions mean very little when you actually come to designing buildings. So we need kind of measurable goals. And so the kinds of questions that you need to be asking to dig around this big why is or some of the answers that you might get, sorry, are about talking about the kind of next generation, providing a kind of a comfortable environment for my family in kind of all seasons. Again, this is quite kind of hearts and minds, not particularly tangible, but something meaningful. And it often comes down to family, you know, well, I'll say kind of next of kin. Yeah, it's often goes that way. And then in the middle here, you know, kind of what does that mean? So you're starting to put a bit of meat on the bones. And this is often where a lot of people, when you talk to them about their project, this is where they start. They don't understand the big why part, but they start with, I want to build a passive house, I want to create a super eco home, or be totally off grid, or whatever. And they've somehow come up with that, but you need to dig a little bit deeper as to why they're talking about that. But still, this middle section, the kind of the guerrilla goals, is not entirely measurable. There are some things that you could infer from what they're saying. But again, with further conversation, we can turn this into something meaningful, like a SAP rating, or a a certified passive house, or energy cost below a certain number, or, you know, U values that mustn't exceed blob, whatever. You know, for passive house, that's particularly the case, or an air tightness value. And so you can start putting numbers against these things. And actually, if you revisit the top, you can create this kind of cascade that goes from very, very, very emotional kind of thoughts and statement and a meaningful thing into something that's actually achievable for the design team. So quite a handy tool, that one. And I would suggest you use it. Step 2 is about collaboration and communication. This is becoming so important. And over the last year, since I've done this presentation, even you know, kind of even more so, really. And this is just about the ability to be able to communicate what you're thinking, communicate what you know, and be able to communicate that effectively. We live in a world where it's far too easy to communicate too much. But if we all understand that success for sustainable projects fundamentally lies with proper communication at the right time as well, in a project. And if that's done right, and if it's measured, and if it's managed, it can be incredibly insightful, and everybody can get something from the project. And a lot of this professionally comes down to knocking down the walls between silos, getting people around the table earlier on in a project. And I use this term, kind of building the A team. So we probably all understand, well, hopefully we all understand that, you know, you have a client, you've got an architect, and, you know, whatever role they're doing, but you've got somebody who's kind of taking the kind of fundamental design principles and responsible for making that happen. You've got a builder, you're likely to have a structural engineer. Increasingly, you're highly likely to have an energy consultant on the project. And then you've got your trades, your electrician, your plumbers, and all those kind of necessary trades to get the project done. Finding those critical members for which, if the project didn't have it wouldn't happen, or it would be very, very, very high risk. You need to identify those individuals as early as possible, and find individuals who are keen on communicating. You know, there's very little point in having somebody that knows a great deal but can't communicate with the rest of the team, because the strength here is in numbers in the early stages of sustainable projects. And admittedly, you know, there is a conversation to be had with the client about, you know, maybe biasing fees at an earlier stage because these specialists are around the table. But the overall aim is to spend less money, not to spend more money on consultants and other specialists on the project. So there are a few kind of different conversations to have, but transparency and knowledge sharing is so critical. And hopefully a lot of you have experienced that and sharing of information, just these nuggets of information. And as those team members have been on more sustainable projects and have gone through the pain and learn, sharing those learnings in a very non-judgmental, open way, so the project that you're on can benefit is ideal. Step 3 is about software and tools. We live in an ever more complex built design environment. Whilst I talked about simplicity at the start of the webinar, we've got a lot more kind of integrated services, and this is probably quite a strong statement, but experience on traditional buildings is increasingly, as the months go on and the years go on, becoming pretty worthless. Technology, the way that we build, the systems and services, and the analysis that goes into making those sing together is moving on at such a pace that just because somebody's been building homes for 40 years, their knowledge is increasingly becoming worthless because it's becoming outdated. And if you understand that and you lean into that, you would also appreciate that as things are moving on, if you carry on doing things the old way without embracing software in various forms, the design risk is increasing. And I've talked about this in other presentations. If you don't understand where you are with the design to an appropriate level for that stage, the risk of going wrong rapidly increases. And for those who bury their head in the sand and are, you can't have an honest conversation with a client about spending more money to do more and more appropriate analysis as the stages go on, hoping that everything's going to be okay, that usually ends up in a huge car crash. And particularly as sustainability or sustainable buildings get more sustainable, as they get tighter in their definition, that risk becomes very costly, very rapidly. But we've got a whole plethora of tools which can be used at different REBA stages to help out here. There's no excuse. These things don't cost tens of thousands of pounds. They cost hundreds and thousands sometimes of pounds to do this. And given the value of most projects, it's still a minute amount of money. So there are early stage concept tools available. We've got free tools out there in the ether. There are increasing amount of free tools and people who can use those free tools that can be used within practices, not having to rely on consultants, and increasingly an awareness of where limitations lay within practices, and consultants need to be kind of brought on board, or analysts need to be brought on board to help develop that design and keep that risk to a low level. So there's lots and lots of choice out there. Increasingly, you guys will have heard about embodied carbon calculators, one-click LCA, building physics modeling. We use IES virtual environment. So you've got dynamic thermal modeling, and often hand in hand with that is ventilation modeling. You've got PHPP, the passive house planning package. You've got daylight modeling. There's all kinds of things that you can do. And as I say, in today's buildings, and increasingly the higher and higher bars that you've got to jump through to meet, BREEAM criteria, or passive house, or the REBA 2030 targets of any flavour, you need to start going down these routes. And often these things are quite interrelated. So choosing packages where you can get multiple outputs from the same model is increasingly becoming a very kind of powerful tool. And say eminently affordable. If you haven't used these kinds of things on your projects, understand the costs and understand the benefits, and do your own kind of cost benefit analysis for your own practice and your client type. But I would put big money on that. Almost any client type would benefit from using more software on their projects. And then step 4 is about learning from success, and more importantly, mistakes. We all have an increasingly strong professional responsibility to ourselves and to our clients to learn. And as I say, the risks of not learning fast enough and implementing change in the way that we design buildings becomes a far sharper and more painful shock. building refinement, the way that we design buildings and the way that we improve them and the way that we learn from the what's gone right and what's gone wrong. I think we are digging into more detail and trying to be analytical about that, and that's no bad thing. We've been so lazy for so long, learning from projects, and it's we've all been on projects where really exciting at the start, and it's exciting as you get into kind of stage 4, and then building starts on site and it's exciting, and then something happens and then something else happens, and maybe the relationship sours slightly with the client as you go through, maybe not, and then as you get towards the end of the project, your mind moves on to other projects, and so you kind of scrabble over the line to get that project done, and then your mind's elsewhere on other projects, and maybe we don't keep in touch with clients as well as we should do. And so we don't really understand whether they're being used the way that we thought they were going to be used. And if we haven't built a model at the start, then who knows what the performance gap is, even if you did catch up with the client and all was hunky-dory on the project. So there is, as we strive to better understand how the buildings should be performing and how they're designed to perform well, and we strive to get better feedback from our clients at the end of projects, we can figure out how accurately our designs and the design process and the execution is. And the better we get at that, and the more reliable, or the more reliably we can deliver sustainable projects that are actually sustainable, and you can prove them as such, and the client's over the moon, that only leads to one thing, which is bigger business growth, more success for our teams, and more profitability. And you start stretching away from others in the space. And for those of you who are interested in growing your businesses, that's a fantastic thing and not that difficult to do. This is a graphic that I've used before, and this is really about learning over the next, 8 years now. For the rest of the decade, we are in, over the next kind of couple of years, we're in a super duper steep learning curve. It feels like, I mean, even for me, it feels like there is a tsunami of frameworks. The building regulations are going to be changing. There's all kinds of different things like embodied carbon overheating, operational energy, water efficiency. Tons and tons of things that buildings now have to do to a very tight or meaningful, a very sustainable level. And there's a huge amount of learning to be done for everybody. I mean, everybody over the next few years, until it kind of settles down. We know where we're going. We know how to get there. We've got a couple of projects under our belt, a few projects under our belt, maybe 5 projects under our belt. And so we understand where the risks lie. We understand what we've got to do to deliver those buildings, and incrementally we start increasing. So over the next few years, mega steep learning curve. And then we end up with this period of kind of getting comfortable with that. Once we understand that pretty quickly we're going to have to be designing to net zero carbon, we understand what that means. We understand the rules of the game. We've done a few projects in that order, and so it becomes easier. And then you settle into this steady improvement as things progress. Building technology improves, our understanding improves, data and analytics improve, and but at the moment we've got to overshoot and get up to a level that we should have been, maybe a decade ago, but we haven't. So we've made that a really steep learning curve for ourselves. And again, this is just a kind of an overview of practices that learn and practices that don't. Practices that don't learn go backwards quite a bit before they start their new project. Practices that learn and use what they've learned on their next practice will see a huge amount of compounded knowledge being put to a massive amount of successful, productive use, and you will win more projects if you put that knowledge to use. It will be far easier, and you just simply will do better, and you'll start pulling away from people who you believe maybe are your local kind of competitors, and you'll just get better jobs, and you'll get far more meaningful information out of those when you complete them. And the final thing here, just on learning, if you guys haven't had a look at this yet, it's a long old document. It's 150 pages or something. And I was speaking to Alistair Ben Dixon, who helped put this together. This has been 2 years in the making, and this is the Architects Declare Practice Guide. Whether or not, I couldn't give two hoots whether you're signed up to Architects Declare or not. This body of work is incredible. There's so many industry-leading contributors that have put time and effort into this document. It's worth reading, whether or not, as I say, your practice is signed up to the Architects Declare movement. Do read it, do digest it. It's going to take you a bit of a while to digest it, but it's got some fantastic things in there. Everything from, materials, processes, existing buildings, retrofit buildings, embodied carbon. The whole gamut of stuff is in there. And if you start to understand this, and it's been compiled in a really, really kind of reader-friendly and usable way, with some killer numbers and graphics in there, you'll really start making some considerable progress. So I would suggest you follow the link here and have that practice guide by your bedside for at least for the next few months, and start implementing some of the things into building design. So where have other practices seen success? It's always interesting to kind of bring this back to what other practices, what I've seen other practices, what we've seen other practices doing, to kind of give you a flavor here. So what have other practices done to make themselves more sustainable, start moving the needle when it comes to talking to clients, doing projects? And this may sound really, really obvious, but start actively marketing that you're doing more sustainable design. We will almost, well, I'm hoping now every single one of us has been involved in a project where there is some element of sustainability, whether you're going above and beyond building regulations for U values, whether you've put in a heat pump, whether you put in solar panels, and that's fine. And you could argue that, well, I'm sure other people have done that. Well, yeah, they might have done that, but better telling that story to our clients and our wider team, and sharing the learnings from those projects. That's what marketing is all about. And so don't hide in a hole. Make sure you get that information out, get that information on your website, write a blog about it, what you've been doing, share that with your colleagues, and actively marketing that you're doing something. Because we all start somewhere, and even if you haven't done a passive house or a net zero carbon building yet, it's one step, and you'll get there. Where every step is a step closer. So actively marketing that you're doing something sustainable. And funnily enough, people who want to do more sustainable work will start knocking on your door a bit more frequently from a client point of view. Offering sustainable design options. This is, I can't remember who did this, but I think there's a few architects doing this now. And it is a brave step. You need to be a bit further on down the education line, but probably not as far as you think. So there was a lot of feedback a year ago from practices who said, well, look, I think we're going to put clients off here if we offer, I don't know, a passive house design or some uber duper sustainable project. The client's going to get put off by the cost. We don't kind of necessarily fully know what we're doing, which is a fair shout. Nobody wants to put clients off. But if you are more educated here, just because you have a client who might be more cost sensitive, have a think, and maybe this is just an exercise as a practice to run. But other architects are offering a super duper sustainable design option, and yeah, that takes more time, and yeah, it takes more thinking. Yes, it takes more design, but you give the client that option. And obviously, if you've had that discussion early on with the client brief and you understand what the sustainability goals are, there's half a chance that they might actually spend an extra sum of money to do something that really moves the needle as far as sustainability is concerned. So I know other practices are doing that, and other practices have, we're almost kind of gone as far as net zero design, should their clients want to do that. Early stage sustainability questionnaires for their clients, that's a really simple one. If you're not necessarily confident asking about sustainability, having an initial kind of simple kind of questionnaire that clients can fill out, and then you can talk around that, is something that other practices are doing. So it's a bit just part of their process, part of their briefing process. I've said here about baking in sustainable thinking into the culture. This is, can be tricky for bigger practices, but certainly smaller practices. They've held lunch and learn sessions. They're doing a lot more sustainable design CPDs. It's all about information sharing and thinking when every new project comes across their desk, what else could we do to make this more sustainable? What else could we do to the fabric? What could we do to the airtightness? What could we do rather than putting a gas boiler in? And it doesn't necessarily mean they do those things, but they think about that and they build that into their design process. Hiring staff with sustainable design experience. Hopefully that should be a kind of a fairly obvious one. If you're in a lucky enough position to be growing your teams, have a look for architectural students or staff members who have design experience, sustainable design experience. Why not? There's a lot of people who are doing extracurricular things as well as their architectural design courses, and you're after passion, after people who can bring that to the table and maybe teach the existing team a thing or two about sustainable design. Of course, adding energy consultants to the core design team, I would say that, but a lot of people are doing it for good reason, to just try and minimize the risk and draw on that experience. That a decent energy consultant should be living and breathing energy efficiency and sustainability, and they haven't got to worry about such things as architect design and structural engineering and things like that. Their specialism is helping bring knowledge about sustainability and carbon reduction in whatever form. That's their specialist area. So a lot of practices are doing that to bolster their sustainable knowledge. And then finally, slowly practices are thinking about light touch post-occupancy evaluation. We're not going to go into it in mega detail here, but light touch, the definition of light touch is really all around a simple questionnaire, talking to the client. We're not talking about data logging 5 million points in a home to find out whether the building performs or not. It's simple stuff, simple discussion, simple monitoring, and very simple measuring and just getting feedback at 6 months, a year, maybe even 2 years after the building's been occupied. So all these kinds of things, various practices are doing. Some are doing one, some are doing all of them, some are doing 2 or 3 in various forms. So again, how to get started. If you are at the beginning of the journey, just think about taking one step. Don't think about taking 20 all in one go. There is time to catch up. You need to get going, but what are some of the first steps? I think a big one, and I think this is super powerful, and this is what I've tried to encourage my team to do, is really keep asking questions of the clients. Maybe next client, maybe you've got a client meeting this week, maybe it's the first meeting you've had with them. Try and understand if they are into kind of sustainability or low energy building design, whether that's existing building or a new one that they're looking at. Try and understand why they are interested in sustainability. And this is, earlier on in the presentation, as I mentioned, this is really kind of hearts and minds. This isn't because building controls have told us to. This is really kind of emotive thinking and asking 2 or 3 kind of probing questions instead of letting the client talk to you and explain what they're thinking. May just unlock some really helpful kind of insight, and maybe give them a heads up before your meeting saying you're going to ask them about this, as they got a bit of time to think about it as well. May also help. So think about the why. Ask about the why of sustainability. Maybe a simple one. Maybe this is a more tricky one, but find out what you are personally or as a practice weakest at regarding sustainability. And there may be 50 things you think you're weak at. There's going to be a few things you're really weak at, or you just haven't got the foggiest about. And if you identify those things as important to know, but you know nothing about them, then read a blog, watch a webinar, do something so that you've got that first kind of nugget of information. There's always the temptation to learn more about stuff we already know a lot about. And I always think about prepping for exams here. Well, what's the point in that? Because you're still only going to be answering 1 question out of 10. What you want to be doing is learn about stuff you don't know a lot about, but you know is important. You should be finding something else about. So you know, everything's kind of keeping pace. You're not just super duper at one thing and then you're awful at the others. So identify that one thing you're weakest at, and set a bit of homework for yourself or your team to bring something to the discussion, a bit of research and a bit of reading, so you can take the next step up. Coming back to the client here, ask your new client what their sustainability aspirations are, and you know, as they go on to ask their why as well. And this actually, going back to point number one, this is your why. It's important to find out the client's why, but understand what your why is. Why are you interested in sustainability beyond profit and because everybody else is doing it? Try and understand the purpose of yourself and your practice first. And then number 4 here is, what's kind of one thing, if you think about your offering to your clients, what is the one thing that you could do around sustainable design, whether that's an additional meeting, or whether that's an offering to design more sustainably, or looking at, I don't know, embodied carbon, doing an embodied carbon snapshot of the proposed project, just something that will give more information to the client without costing you a ton of money, will inform you or your team as well. And again, you know, you'll quickly find that probably to offer something like that doesn't take a huge amount of effort, probably doesn't take very much cost and time in the long run as well, and it means that you're getting more sustainable feedback on the designs that you're doing, and increasingly clients will be prepared to pay for that information as well, so you haven't just got to do it for free. So there's food for thought there as to one thing extra that you could do around sustainable design. And then the final thing here is, if maybe you're at the back end of a project, maybe you haven't done any of this stuff and you're just finishing up a project. How about creating just a basic client feedback form, asking them about comfort, you know, around the building, you know, and talking to them after they've been in there for 6 months, talking to them after they've been in there for a year, and just kind of getting a feel for the building, you know, sort out some return site visits of your own, and being open to sharing that information. I know Fionn Stevenson, who's a big part of the Building Performance Network, they'll have a great place to go for some guidance on that light touch post-occupancy evaluation that you can do without being overly invasive. It doesn't have to cost a ton of money, but allows you to kind of pick up on how to improve for next time around, and gets you into getting that feedback, getting over yourself and getting some feedback at the end of the project. So key takeaways in summary: think about sustainability as early as you can do, and talk to the client about it. Communicate and collaborate more with your immediate team and the wider professionals that are part of the design team. Embrace software to help inform design. Continuously improve your designs. Keep learning, which is a mega one, and start with small steps. We will start with one step, and then we move on to the next one. We get comfortable with them, and we move on to the next one. And that is it from me. There's a few areas covered there, but hopefully you guys found that insightful. Have you guys got any questions? Do feel free to throw them in the chat box at the bottom. If you can't think of an immediate question about the content of this, feel free to throw out any other questions that you can think of as well. And I'll see if I can help answer those for you. We'll give you 30 seconds or so to have a think about something there. Kat, do you want to just remind us what the next webinar is? If you're there, I'll have a look myself. Right, here we go. Let's have a look at the next events. So we've got on Friday the 10th, so a week on Friday, we've got solar PV design and installation, a practical guide. And I think that is, I'm just trying to think who's hosting that. That's probably the guys from Spirit Energy, and I guess, yeah, they are Spirit Energy. So if you're interested in kind of solar PV design and installation, what actually happens on site, then do feel free to drop into that one. As I say, tell your friends about MESHWORK. We'll get those numbers up to 1,000 by the end of the month, and that is, I think that is it from me. No questions, so we'll call it quits there. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.